If there was one very singular point I would always bring up when Boris Johnson sort of first entered office, especially after his general election win, it was very, very quickly highlighted how much Johnson is very much a creature of habit. And one in habit in particular is very, very much noted by a lot of people who know him and his sort of close circle of friends, and that is one of revenge. Yes, Johnson is infamous, apparently, among his inner circle for going after people and getting his revenge in sometimes big and dramatic ways. And with the Northern Ireland Protocol, with what we are seeing very, very recently, Johnson is poised to take his revenge very, very clearly. Like I say, we're on resignation watch at the moment, just to let you know. Apparently, the rumors are at the moment that Suella Braverman is poised to offer her resignation, which will be big. If she resigns, it will be big, and it will signal what we talked about yesterday, that the ERG and the other hardcore Brexiteers are poised to go after Rishi Sunak. And if it means dethroning him to preserve their precious Brexit, then they absolutely will do that. They will go after him. And one of the people that will very happily encourage that and even join in on that is, of course, Johnson himself, for his ultimate, shall we say, Johnson revenge. So today we're going to go have a look at Conservative Home. Now, I've said this before, Conservative Home, very influential when it comes to sort of the non-parliamentary Conservative Party. So that's why we're going over this today, because what are they telling the average Conservative voter what is going on? What what do they make of the fact that Johnson is clearly going after revenge, and of course all this mess over the Northern Ireland Protocol? What's going on behind the scenes? So it's, as always, very, very sort of a fascinating insight in almost to the inner workings of the Conservative Party from Conservative Home. So that's why we're covering it today. So as always, before we do that, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, do remember to ring the bell as well. And of course, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club down below, the Patreon page, and of course, the One of Nation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. So, and as always, let's go on over to Conservative Home to have a look at what they're saying, or at least the Conservative view of what's going on with all this stuff, certainly around Johnson getting his revenge, and of course, the potential problems that Sunak could run into with the Northern Ireland Protocol. So, Rishi Sunak lost last summer's Conservative leadership election to Liz Truss, having played a part in the defenestration of her predecessor, Boris Johnson. When she failed and he replaced her without the election going to the party membership stage. So, he can't claim a mandate from either of them, from either the British public. And this could be a problem for him at the best of times, even if he were not the fifth Tory leader in less than 10 years, near what currently feels like the end of a long cycle of government, leading a country feeling very much the combined impact of the financial crash, COVID, the Ukraine war, and Brexit. The Prime Minister knows these limits well, and his responses have been to focus on 5 priorities, the main which are economic, and avoiding anything that might either distract from them or weaken his position further. Which, again, very, very true. He has done his best to avoid doing that. So, Channel 4 privatisation, drop it. Online safety bill, tone it down. Trans conversion therapy, avoid a revolt. Housing targets, the same. Onshore wind, ditto. After all, the Conservatives are 22 points behind in the polls, and local elections are less than 3 months away. And that is what we have seen continuing all through Sunak's premiership. This, as we said, is what would define it. Not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to upset powerful factions within the Tory party, which may very, very quickly escalate to dethrone him. And this whole whatever Sunak is cooking up, we've already seen the ERG mobilizing to potentially dethrone Sunak. Like I say, Suella Braverman is on resignation watch. There very well may be others who could also resign in protest of Sunak's way he's handling or doing the Northern Ireland Protocol. We just don't know at the moment because we do not know what the details of this new potential deal are. So let's continue. So, do nothing to stir a parliamentary party fractionalized by the nature of politics and recent experience and its own peril. Above all, offer no opportunity to that master of it, Johnson, or do anything that might provoke letters to Graham Bradley. So, why then is Sunak doing so over an issue as remote from most of the voters as the Northern Ireland Protocol? For the more he fiddles with this Pandora's box, the more he risks a host of harms flying out from it to revenge him. The Democratic Unionist Party, the European Research Group, Truss, and Johnson himself. So this is a big problem for Sunak. You know, the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to be resolved. It's not something you can just leave or kick down the can, kick the can down the road, so to say. He has to actually deal with it. And if he doesn't, the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, if that fully passes, that could potentially start a trade war. So the whole reason Rishi Sunak might be trying to solve this Northern Ireland Protocol issue is he is desperately trying to avoid a trade war with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, so that the economy can keep on moving, to try and avoid any of those economic damages that will create. So back to it. Why then is Sunak doing so? Oh, sorry, no, we've already read that. So government sources offer the following answers. The absence of devolved government risks destabilizing Northern Ireland, so the protocol problem must be cracked to allow the DUP's return. Furthermore, the status quo is not an option. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill awaits its third reading in the Lords, and a decision about its future must be made one way or the other. So, as I've said, everything really is coming to a head very, very quickly. And the problems with the protocol itself are far bigger. It works for neither the government, Northern Ireland, or the EU, as Leo Varadkar, Ireland's Taoiseach, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, never mind. At the time of its negotiation, that has conceded. So some of those sources go on to claim that Brexit, and currently a net electoral negative for the government, must be turned into a voter net plus. Of course, fixing the protocol is essential if the UK-EU trade is to flow more fully and the economy to recover faster, which ultimately I think is what Sunak's true goal is. He wants to basically try and rebuild that economic trust, because Liz Truss destroyed it within seconds, and he is trying to sort of reassure people that the Conservative Party is the party of good economic governance, when Truss just went and destroyed it in literally a matter of seconds. So others point back to the Truss government and the sanction threats if parts of the bill which would allow the protocol to be overridden are triggered by her successor if it becomes law, or even if it passes onto the statute book. They cite the possibility of such sanctions being specifically targeting at the constituencies of the ERG members. After all, the protocol has never been fully implemented, and the view of these sources is that the EU isn't permanently prepared to let the current grace period and diplomatic standoff roll on indefinitely. So to say that a fixed protocol would be better than resumed hostilities is a statement of the obvious. But how likely is the shimmering prospect whereby Sunak, having helped to win a first victory for the Union by playing a part in the fall of Nicola Sturgeon. I don't see how he was, but again, you continue with that belief, guys. Crack on with that. Is able to gain a second by claiming that the protocols, by trying to calm the protocol's troubled waters. For Geoffrey Donaldson, the DUP's leader, we will be looking over his shoulder at his parliamentary colleagues. Then, in turn, we'll be looking at theirs and their party's activists. It will all be, and we will all remember the fall of David Trimble, brought down by unionists who claimed that he had been captured by the unionist enemies. No wonder the DUP has set its 7 conditions for any protocol settlement, which constitute a high bar for Sunak to clear. And I've said this before, that those 7 conditions are impossible. They are absolutely impossible to be concluded. I mean, they want basically the border in the Irish Sea gone, and one of them is that Northern Ireland should have a say over the laws that are made in Brussels. I can't see the EU doing that. And of course, they want to get rid of the European Court of Justice. And again, so long as Northern Ireland is in the single market and customs union, that ain't going to change. So whatever it is that Sunak has done certainly must be big, because as we've said this before, Markus Sovak has summoned the EU 27 diplomats to have a look at this deal, to talk about these negotiations. So whatever Sunak is proposing must be pretty significant. So these include the no checks on goods from going to Northern Ireland to Great Britain, or from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And there is room for thousands of quibbles about what particular checks will apply to which goods and for what claimed destination. The ERG's gaze is focused on the trade details that the European Court, and it may be named in the DUP's conditions, but the role preoccupates the role of Marc Francois and his colleagues. Under the terms of the UK-EU trade agreement, the court has no role in settling disputes. It is far from clear that the ERG is willing to accept any other role for the court, including binding rulings in relation to the EU's own law in the event of disputes. Some claim that the ERG isn't the force that it was, and that some of its most senior former colleagues, such as Suella Braverman and Steve Baker, are now government ministers. But senior ERG members do report that they haven't seen the legal text of any proposed protocol deal, nor apparently has Donaldson. And I suspect he is doing this on purpose to give as little potential time for, shall we say, trouble to arise. And I'm surprised also, probably because I think if he does, he suspects this deal might leak, which might potentially scupper any deal that he might be planning. I think that's one of the reasons. But we continue. So one of the reasons why he will have been unwilling to give the Prime Minister carte blanche then, when they met in Belfast last week. And are those former ERG members now in government fully in the loop? Is Sunak's plan resignation proof? What happens if the DUP refuses to go back into government? What would the Prime Minister simply press on? And if he does, what does he think would be the point? Above all, what happens if Truss and Johnson get their feet in the Commons on the day of the Prime Ministerial statement and denounce any deal, if not to be, to find a point on it, a sellout, and urge the completion of the protocol bill? How does that interplay with all the restive party activists, the looming local elections, the tensions as MP selections and reselections mount, the budget, small boats, and of course, the legacy of regicide, legitimate and insurrectional, I described above? It seems that the new protocol deal would require a Commons vote. Exactly. That is why we have seen it is good that Starmer has gone, look, in the national interest, let's solve the Northern Ireland Protocol. If this deal is good and it's in the national interest, Labour will back you. That means you do not have to rely on your backbench. So that is good, but we'll see what happens on that. But it also does go to show you just how weak Sunak really is to have to rely on Labour votes to pass this, given the fact that he has such a big majority. But a means can doubtless be found, assuming that the government doesn't spring one on itself for its own purpose. Does Sunak really want to risk reliance on Keir Starmer in the lobbies? It may be unfair to suggest that the Prime Minister may not be a politician only to quibble when he tries to act like a statesman. Cracking the problem of the protocol is a noble quest, and Sunak will not need me to point out the protocol's biggest critics, namely the ERG, mostly voted for it, and that Johnson himself built the house that he now says should be demolished. And this is where Sunak can strike back. Sunak can really easily strike back at both the ERG and at Johnson, saying, look, I am having to clean up your mess. You said this deal was perfect, that it was oven ready. And he can turn around and just say, I'm sorry, but it is not ready. It was never ready. We are still having to clean up a mess that you have made. And that's how Sunak could take on the ERG and Johnson themselves. But I think he is not politically weak enough, and he does not have, I think, the spine to be able to take them on. So, nevertheless, there is not an alternative, though, which does offer very similar gains to process the fewer risks. After all, Michael Gove and Marta Sovak found ways of kicking the protocol can down the road in 2021. Is it really impossible for Sunak to say to his counterparts in terms of the politicians' reserve for the others in private, to say, look, my friends, I'm in a bit of a bind here. Of course, I want the protocol settled, and of course, I want our relationship with Europe to be eased. It is not Britain, and is not, of course, Britain playing its part in Ukraine, working for our collective security. The elections are only 18 months away, maybe less. We're already strung out by a couple of years. Just give me a bit more time. In this version of things, the bill is passed, but its provisions are not enacted. A few technical tweaks to the protocol are made, and life goes on. Bad for Northern Ireland, yes, though perhaps less so than the alternative, inglorious, and certainly humiliating, possibly. Maybe Sunak would therefore miss a triumph, but he would certainly lessen the risk. Better a live mouse than a dead lion. So, what we're getting essentially from from again a very influential source in the Conservative Party is to basically say, look, Sunak, just let sleeping lions lie. Be a mouse and just let this pass. I can't believe they're advocating this, knowing what they've already said about the problems in the Northern Ireland Protocol. But that's insane. That's really, really insane. The fact that we've got this this potential nonsense being pushed by such an influential piece, trying to say, "Hey, please give me time." You know, it'll be a complete fudge, but we'll kick the can down the road again. No, you have to solve it, and if not Sunak, who? Who then solves the problem of the Northern Ireland Protocol and isn't just kicked down the can eternally? Because I'll tell you now, if there is a general election and the Conservatives lose, and as we've seen, they are on course to lose by a very big majority, then it becomes Labour's. And Labour's potential solution is one I would support, which is closer alignment with the EU. So if this is apparently very close to the May deal, as apparently Jacob Rees-Mogg has said, then could we see maybe a backstop type solution being proposed where the UK ends up being in the customs union? I'd be okay with that. I think it would certainly ease a lot of the business problems and certainly the problems in and around trade. But of course, that would of course have consequences as well. And of course, the ERG would proclaim betrayal and everything under the sun. But we've seen their proposals, and I said any future prime minister, any be they Labour or Conservative, can easily take on the ERG by saying, "Look, your deal was an absolute mess. It was awful. So we're having to clean up your mess. You told the people how good and amazing Brexit was. It hasn't turned out that way. So we're now having to deal with your mess and make sure that Brexit works. And of course, what they mean by that is let's do closer deals with the EU. Let's align with them on these things. And of course, as we've said, that starts the path down the whole road of, well, if we're so closely aligned with Europe, why not just be in the single market and customs union? And once we're in there, why not be a full member of the EU and have a say on what goes on in the single market and customs union? So, yeah, very interesting, very interesting piece from Conservative Home indeed. Basically saying, yeah, just fudge it, kick it down the road, and solve it later. I don't see how you solve it later. And let's say Sunak magically manages to win the next election, maybe has not a strong majority, say he's got a majority of 10. Do you think the ERG are going to be any less trouble to Sunak if he tries to solve it after? Absolutely not. And this comes down to maybe Sunak or whoever it will be. There will eventually have to be a reckoning in the Conservative Party about Brexit and how bad it has actually been, not only for the Conservative Party, it's been bad for their brand, but also has been bad for the country as well. And sooner or later, that reckoning will have to be had. And I suspect if they lose the next general election, that's when it will potentially happen. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page. And of course, a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can well buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.